Hey guys, how's it going? Brandon here for RC Nightmare. Today we're giving you a little tutorial on how to keep your cars as waterproof as possible. Now we all know that waterproofing is kind of a misnomer because nothing's waterproof. It's only as waterproof as you make it. Now Traxxas does some good things with their cars by waterproofing the electronics and whatnot. Other companies are starting to follow. We're seeing HPI doing this too. But there's still a little bit that needs to be done to fully waterproof them. One of the most important things are your bearings. So here I got one of our Traxxas bearings. These are nice shielded bearings from the factory, but they're just oil-filled. Oil-filled bearings, as opposed to grease-filled bearings, are not very waterproof. It doesn't take a whole lot of water to get in that bearing to displace the oil, and before you know it, it's rusted out, shot. You're replacing all your bearings on your car. That can happen pretty quick, especially when you're hunting out water, you're going through a lot of it. Bearings take quite a punch. They handle all the power to your car, so you can imagine it doesn't take a whole lot of moisture to ruin them. So the advantage to using grease is that grease can't be displaced by water very easily. We can fill these, or it's called packing them with grease, and in doing so we prevent water from coming in. Now there's a phrase used, and it's even on this little tube here: prevent moisture infiltration by occupation. That's a perfect way to put it. You're literally filling the space with grease so that even if water did get in, it can't fill it up. The grease stays there, it holds the oil for you, and your bearing stays waterproof to a point. Now, if you have already run your bearings through a bunch of water, I would recommend taking them all out, feeling them. You want to spin them, put them on top of a ballpoint pen to spin them up, make sure they feel all right to you. If there's any doubt, if they feel gritty, sandy, anything like that, it's time to replace it. It's already too late. But if you got a new car or you haven't ridden your car through water yet, it'd be a good idea to remove all the bearings from it and pack them with grease. Now in the past, this is a pretty daunting process. You take this bearing, you take a tiny little tool, pop off the rubber seal, and then pack grease in there by hand. That's pretty difficult and very time consuming. So products like this guy here, it's called the Greaser, have made our lives a whole lot easier. This is something you can get online. Your local hobby store may carry it as well, but it's a automatic bearing packer. Kind of a funny looking tool. Well, let me show you how it works. You pull off the cap here, and this guy, this part here, is really meant to hold the bearing. So on the inside of this guy, we have a cone shape. The bearing goes right inside there. You can see it fits in there. And the tip of this goes inside the bearing. So what this does is it prevents anything from coming through the outside or the inside of the bearing. It seals it up against this thing. Now the bottom of this guy here is filled with grease, and the top is spring-loaded. I can push down on this. And in doing so, what you do is you push grease up through it. This guy is real cool. So this would be filled with grease. We stick our bearing in here. Put the top of the tool there, you push downwards, and in doing so the grease comes up through it. You'll see the grease start to squirt through the shields, and you know that the bearing is completely filled with grease from the bottom up. Awesome little tool. You can pop through a whole set of bearings in just minutes with this. I haven't even used this guy yet. The only reason I have this one is because my buddy has one too, and I liked it so much I decided to get one for myself. So we fill the bottom of this guy with grease. That'll sit in there just like so, and again, as soon as you push down into it, the grease comes up through the bearing and it's forced through the two shields. So now you don't have to remove them, go through all the painstaking process of trying not to ruin the seal as you take it off. It really fills up your bearing with grease to make it almost completely waterproof. So one nice mod you want to do to completely waterproof your car. Now granted, there are some downsides, some negatives to filling your bearings with grease. The most prominent of which is that you lose a little bit of speed. Grease has a lot more resistance than oil, so in doing so, yeah, you lose a little speed, but hey, if you're going to run your car through water all the time, that's a huge good trade-off, I guess you could call it. I'd rather have my bearings sealed and save a set, I don't know, a whole set of bearings probably runs $80, $100 instead of the alternative. So that's how you'd waterproof your bearings. Now there are other things in a car that may require some grease if you really want to get crazy with it. Things like hinge pins and whatnot. Those things over time, if they're not of high quality, will eventually rust out and you'll get some binding. Your shock shafts too. Probably a good idea to just go in there with a little bit of silicone spray. You don't necessarily have to grease it up or use the grease that you do in bearings, but a little silicone spray and hinge pins, things like that will help to keep them waterproofed and last a little longer. Okay, so after we've waterproofed all our mechanical parts, let me bring in a Slash 4x4 here. Again, this is by Traxxas. We want to look at our electronic parts. Now again, Traxxas waterproofs most of their electronics, and they do a really good job of it. The thing that remains open to water and moisture corrosion are all your connections. So here are 3 motor connections. All these guys here are battery connection, and more importantly, if I grab a battery here, the balance connector on the battery too. All these things are sitting in your car and they're relatively exposed as you're going through water or whatnot. So you can get something called dielectric grease. I got a tube of it here. You can pick this up at your automotive parts stores, or likewise, hardware stores probably carry it as well. And it's a type of grease not for moving parts. Make sure you don't get that wrong. I'm not going to be using this on my bearings. It's useless for that. This is a grease that's just made to protect electrical connections. So again, like the tube said before, it prevents moisture infiltration by occupation. If you're filling the connection with grease, water has nowhere to go. Even if water tries to get in there, it's already packed with grease, so it protects it. On top of that, it keeps it from oxidizing and essentially getting ruined from all the water. So what we do with this stuff, real simple. I just take it, and this tube's got a big enough mouth. You just stick the whole connector in there, coat it with the dielectric grease, like so, and just push it back on. And in doing this, we're creating effectively a watertight seal of dielectric grease. And again, dielectric grease is made specifically for electrical connections. Keeps a good solid connection, and it's made just for it. We'll do the same thing on our Deans here, and this is something you may have to do once in a while. If you want to keep the Deans in good shape, I bet you if any run in the water, you go out look at a couple of your Dean connectors, they're turning green. And again, that's from corrosion, more specifically copper corrosion. So I'm just going to put a light coat on here, kind of cover it as much as you can. A little sloppy looking, but this again will do wonders for our connection, making sure that we're not losing power and eventually getting a bad connection. And now I'll do the same thing for your balance tab. I'm just going to take the thing of grease and I'm going to squeeze some, force it into the little balance pins there. You can even push this into a balance tab or balance connector a couple times to work it in. But what we're doing is preventing that stuff that's sitting there. I mean, let's say this, obviously it's not the right battery for the car, but if I have this thing sitting in here, I'm running around in water, this balance connector is just hanging free and it's getting soaked. And I bet you a few of you have some of these that again have turned green from corrosion as you run it in water and don't protect it. So that's a great way to keep your car in good shape if you're going to run through water. Like I said earlier, nothing is waterproof. We all know this, but a little bit of care and maintenance with tools like this will go a long ways to making sure your car is running as long as it can in the water without losing any power. Now, if you guys have any questions about waterproofing, anything of the sort, feel free to comment down below or visit our website, rcnightmare.com. Appreciate you watching the video, guys. Have a good one.